And why did I pick this story, The Prodigal Son? Actually, it was a bit of a study I did last weekend, and the passage was picked because it's focused on grace, on God's grace. Jesus was great at telling stories, parables, that had some great meaning. And, this story is not just a tale of rebellion and return. The rebellious son, the prodigal son, that word is used, that story has led to that concept of the prodigal, the person who just walks away from the door and goes and lives a selfish life and comes back. But it's not just about rebellion and return. It's actually a really powerful portrait from Jesus about a father whose grace knows no limit. And that's really what we're going to focus on today. Because it tells a story, really. If we go back to it, we're going to just recap it a little bit. This son demands his inheritance early. It's kind of a weird concept. I can't imagine, any of us doing that. But essentially, it's saying he'd rather have the father's wealth than have his presence. Give me all your money. Give me my belongings, and I can walk away. I want your stuff, Dad, but I don't want you. So it's a double. It's double rejection, isn't it? Because it's a rejection of his relationship with his father. I don't want anything to do with you, but I just want to live my life independently and without constraints and just have a lot of fun. And so he leaves home, and he does exactly that. And as the story tells us, he squanders all of his money. He squanders everything he's got on reckless living. He indulges in every kind of pleasures. He makes poor choices. The story later on tells us that obviously he spent a lot of money on prostitutes. It was a lot of parties. Basically, he lived completely wildly, and he burnt it all away. And in those days, unfortunately, you had times of famine. We can't really relate to that directly. We don't experience it, although some parts of the world today still experience famine. Especially in parts of Africa, it's still a concept. So a famine means there's just no food. There's nothing. So he's run out of money, and there's no more food to go around in the country. And he finds himself literally from the glittering and glamorous life, having really probably just had friends who were there for his money, to find himself not only without anything, but in a country that's got nothing to provide for him. So you can imagine when there's a famine, everybody looks after number one. And now his friends have abandoned him, and he's left to fend for himself. And all of a sudden, this person who had it all, who lived out of excess, is reduced to the lowest of lows. And the story tells us he's that hungry that he takes a job feeding pigs. Now, that probably sounds bad to us, but for a Jew, going to work with pigs is just about as low as it gets, because in those days, pigs, pork was seen as dirty animals, definitely not the kind of animals you want to get anywhere near. Yet clearly, he's got no choice. That's all he's got. So he's really sank as low as he can. He's rock bottom in his life. And clearly, at that lowest moment, when he's starving, he's surrounded by these pigs, so he'll not only feel physically dirty, because clearly pigs are not usually very clean, but he's got that sense of dirt from being with these animals that really are seen as very unclean in a deeper way. And then he realizes, in that moment of total having bottomed out his life, that when he reflects back on his home, that the servants, even the lowest servant who works for his dad, has probably got it much better than where he was at that point in time. So, at that moment of clarity and shame, he decides to go home. And clearly he's not expecting to be welcomed back as a son. He's not actually expecting an awful lot. All he's hoping for is just to get a job from his dad. Whatever dad, but maybe he doesn't dare call him dad anymore, but he's thinking, well, maybe there'll be just enough of something left that my dad will give me a job. He's not expecting his dad to welcome him as son, not at all. But you just think, well, it's this bad here, it's might as well a gamble. Even if hopefully my dad will talk to me, hopefully he'll recognize me. And, I mean, when we think about it, it's, the feelings he must have had at that point must have been what? What feelings do you think would be going through that person's mind at that point? Any ideas? Not a catch question. How do you think he's feeling at that point?
Embarrassed.
Definitely.
The lowest point he could be.
Yeah. He's feeling depressed, desperate, embarrassed. Anything else? Any other emotions you think? Shame. Yeah, absolutely. Imagine the shame for that guy to get to that lowest of lowest. And he might be feeling guilty because maybe when it comes to his senses, realized what he's done to his dad by just cutting him off, just wanting his money. So he heads back, clearly not feeling he's even worthy to be called back as a son, and willing to give a chance. He goes there, and surprise or surprise, this is the story tells us, his father is actually looking out for him. His father sees him in the distance, and instead of scolding him, of telling him off, of literally maybe basically laying it on thick on him, he just welcomes him with open arms and embraces him. Not really the sort of turn of events anybody would expect. And there we have it. There's that big moment of reconciliation. The son has returned and the father welcomes him with open arms. It's an incredible story. So, who do we think the father is in this story? Who does that represent? Sorry? God, that's right. God. The message is clear. God is the father in this story. No matter how far anyone can wander, no matter how far we can mess up in our lives, and that doesn't mean that maybe we messed up once, twice, 100 times. God is willing to receive us with open arms. Providing we come with that repentant heart. That chap was so low on the lowly. He wasn't going back to his dad full of bravado or anything. He was going back shattered, broken, and just wanting anything that his father would give him. And that's how God is. It's not. It's not about earning God's love, but it's about that grace that the Father has shown. There's nothing that son deserved, yet the father welcomed him, embraced him. He talks about it, threw a party for him, put the best coat on him, put this ring. They're all symbols of how much the father was so happy to see the son, and he wanted to wrap him up, not in his arms, but restore him. He probably arrived stinky, dirty, disheveled, in rags, and the father put the best clothes on him, this ring, which would have symbolized that, look, you're back, I love you, and I want you to have the best of what I've got to give you. Interestingly enough, what does the older brother represent in our story? What do you think? Slightly less obvious, so there might be different views, but what do you think that older brother... Because remember, the older brother's like, whoa, hang on a second, I've worked hard all these years, I've done everything right over all these years, and you go and rejoice for the return of this son. Look at what he's done. He's burnt all your money. He rejected you. He went away. And now you throw a party for him. How about me? I've worked hard for all these years. What do you think that older brother represents in the story?
Can I just say something? 30 years ago, I was on a mission to young people with a group of other Christians. And we mainly focused, we did the younger son, but we mainly focused on the older son. And the point that we're trying to make to the young people is even when we try to turn away from God, God still loves us and still will let us know that he doesn't want to lose us. Or I should more say, he doesn't want us to lose him and his love and his grace. That was what the father was trying to explain to the older son because of his attitude. I've been a Christian over 40 years, but God loves the person who gave his life to the Lord at dinner time today just as much, just because I've got 40 years service. In God's eyes, that child who has come to say yes to Jesus today is as important and is as loved and has as much grace shown to them.
That's right, absolutely right. So in that sense, the older brother then represents a little bit those who've forgotten about that grace. He's worked, he's done all the right things. He feels he deserves something from his dad. And actually, this is what it's all about. That Jesus reminds us that God rejoices for every heart that comes home. Like you've just said, the heart has come today. God will always rejoice for that. And we must always remember that even for those of us who, like you say, we might have become Christians a long time ago and strive and try to do all the right things and effectively try and maybe please God with that. No doubt we're trying to do that. At the end of the day, God's love never runs out and is fresh every day, and God will always rejoice with that heart of grace. And it's not the primary message, but at the end of the day, it's all about God's grace. And sometimes we all have to look in the mirror, don't we? Because, we can catch in ourselves at times that feeling of the prodigal son. We all, at some point in our lives, either right now or at some point many years ago, we've all wandered away from God's love. We've all done wrong. And in actual fact, it's very possible that we've come to know God's grace, but we've let it slip away, and again, we've wandered away, and we've let ourselves drift to places. And sometimes I say, well, will God take me back? We all understand that grace the first time, but sometimes we forget, like Paul, like it says in one of the Gospels, to forgive 70 times 70. Sometimes we will fall, we will wander, but God's grace is always there. And two really important thoughts is that God's love is always enough. That love of God is enough for all of us. It doesn't matter how far we stray, we're never too far away from God. And clearly that story has been made to show how badly the father in that story, or God, was let down by that son, that he did everything wrong. He did everything wrong, but yet God was willing to take him back. And that's what Jesus is trying to explain. God's love is not earned. That's very clear. And that's what, to a certain extent, the older son was forgetting. Yes, you've worked really hard, my son. You've worked really hard, and that's good. But look at your brother. He did everything wrong, and yet he's come back. He's asked for forgiveness, and I was ready to take him back. Christian life, this unearned love is the foundation of our Christian life. None of us deserve God's love. It's a weird thing to think about it. None of us deserve God's love. And if we understand God's unconditional love, what it'll do is not going to create a spirit of guilt or no, I don't deserve it. Actually, it's that spirit of gratefulness. It's that spirit, the fact that my identity is defined by the fact that I did not deserve it. God's given it to me, that forgiveness I didn't deserve, to allow me to let go of guilt and shame. Once you've embraced God's love and you understand His grace, guilt and shame are gone, because we're now accepted as we are. We get that robe, we get that ring. Heaven throws a big party when we come back to God, and we can move on. We don't have to look back, we can just look forward. And so, at the end of the day, it's never going to be about how good we are or how perfectly we perform. It's about God's mercy. And that's quite good, actually, because, no matter how great your sin is, when you turn back to God, He will forgive you. No matter how great your sin is, no matter what it is, He will forgive you. But also, grace is a great equalizer, because it's not just about the worst of the worst, but it also means that nobody is good enough. How many times do I hear people saying, well, I'm a good person. And it's probably the most frustrating thing to hear, because people will think, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't need God's grace. I'm a good guy. I'm a good guy. And that is almost worse, because then we don't feel we even need God's grace. And once we're in that position, then we're a prodigal, even though if most of our life is okay. Without that repentant heart, we have got no chance. And one of the most profound expressions of God's love is in that word love. How much God loved us. A divine, a self-giving love that's unconditional, it's sacrificial, and it's just not like human love, because very often we find it much easier to love when we get something back in return, and it probably has to love in return. As humans, it's a bit like a two-way thing. It's very hard to love people when they don't love you back. I mean, that's how marriage works. It's two people that love each other, and that's how it works. That's how relationships work. And whether it's that friendship love or whether it's that more, the love that we have as couples, but God's love is different. He loves us unconditionally, and he loves us before we even love him. It's kind of weird, isn't it? It's that love that comes first, that loves us unconditional. It's a love that's foreign to us, because it's not God saying, I'll love you if you love me. It's not, I'll love you before you even like me, before you even care about me. My love will always be there, no matter what. It's unconditional. And that's, in that kind of love, there is no judgment. There's just joy, freedom, and redemption. And that's wonderful. So the story of the prodigal son really reminds us, doesn't it, that grace is not a reward for the righteous. Grace is not there for good people. Grace is not a reward for the righteous, but it's a gift for the returning. Those who are prepared to return to God will get God's grace. God isn't waiting for perfection. He's waiting for our heart. That's what he's waiting for. So let's stop striving to try and earn what God freely gives us. His arms are open. His grace is enough. So let's come home. Let's all come home to God and embrace that grace and that love he's got for us. So there we are. Short word, short thought. Let's just maybe pray for a second and thank God that he's so gracious and he loves us unconditionally. And then I'll invite. Well, actually, if the band wants to come back, and as we finish praying, we can sing our closing hymn. Dear God, we thank you for that grace, for that unconditional love, for the fact that you love us even without you love us even if we don't. You love us even if we just walk away from you, and you're always there waiting for us to come back. And Lord, I pray that if there are any prodigals in this room tonight, if there's anybody that have turned their backs away from you or who have never turned to you, that Lord, they might be touched and understand that unconditional love, that you are there like that Father at the top of the hill, looking out for each one of us to love us, to give us that forgiveness, and through that to free us from guilt, shame, and all the horrible feelings that we can sometimes harbor with us. Lord, your forgiveness is for all of us, and I pray that everyone in this room might embrace it.